When the name Flex Wheeler is mentioned in the world of bodybuilding, many people immediately describe him as the most complete physique ever to step onto a professional stage because his proportions, breathtaking symmetry, full muscle bellies, and the effortless way he presented his physique created the illusion that the audience was looking not at an ordinary human being, but at a living masterpiece that nature creates perhaps once in a generation. And that is exactly why, even decades later, bodybuilding fans continue to argue over one question: how could a man who possessed almost every physical gift required for greatness walk away without ever wearing the crown of Mr. Olympia? For many years, Flex stood against the greatest bodybuilders on the planet, forcing even his own rivals to admit that they were witnessing genetics that could never be recreated through training, nutrition, or performance-enhancing drugs alone. Yet every single time, it seemed that destiny was finally ready to reward him with the sport's greatest title. Something happened that pushed victory just beyond his reach once again, turning his career into something far greater than the story of an athlete who simply failed to win, because it became one of the most tragic and unforgettable stories in the entire history of professional bodybuilding. But was it truly nothing more than bad luck? Or was fate proving that even the closest thing to physical perfection is sometimes not enough to become the greatest? Because behind the flawless posing routines, the standing ovations, and the unforgettable performances stood a man whose life was filled with pain, setbacks, difficult choices, and battles that most fans never saw. And perhaps those unseen battles changed the course of bodybuilding history forever, leaving the world to wonder whether Flex Wheeler was actually the greatest bodybuilder who never became Mr. Olympia. Flex Wheeler did not arrive in professional bodybuilding as just another talented competitor hoping to make a name for himself, because from the very beginning he looked like someone who had been created specifically for this sport, combining extraordinary muscle mass with an impossibly small waist, perfectly balanced proportions, round shoulders, flowing muscle lines, and a level of aesthetics so rare that judges, champions, and bodybuilding legends openly admitted they had almost never seen a physique capable of blending size and beauty so perfectly, which is why many people immediately believed that bodybuilding had finally found the man destined to become its next legendary champion. Yet Flex's journey was never the story of a man who succeeded simply because he had incredible genetics, because long before he stood beneath the bright lights of the Olympia stage, he had already faced personal struggles, painful experiences, and moments that could have broken almost anyone. But instead of allowing hardship to define him, he transformed bodybuilding into something much greater than competition, using every workout, every sacrifice, and every challenge as another step toward proving that the circumstances of your past do not have to decide the limits of your future. And it was this relentless determination that shaped not only one of the greatest physiques in history, but also one of the strongest competitive mindsets the sport had ever seen. As Flex continued winning professional shows, defeating elite competitors, and astonishing audiences with every appearance, the expectations surrounding his career grew larger than ever before, because each performance seemed to confirm the same belief that countless fans, judges, and fellow athletes already shared, that it was no longer a question of whether Flex Wheeler would become Mr. Olympia, but simply when that moment would finally arrive, since it appeared almost impossible that a physique so complete, so balanced, and so breathtaking could leave the greatest stage in bodybuilding without its highest honor. But bodybuilding has always been a sport where perfection alone is never enough, because sometimes history places multiple extraordinary athletes in the same era, sometimes injuries arrive at exactly the wrong moment, and sometimes life creates obstacles that no amount of talent can overcome.
And just as the world seemed ready to witness the coronation of its next king, Flex Wheeler found himself standing in an era dominated by men who would forever change bodybuilding history, beginning a battle that would ultimately define not only his career but also his legacy, leaving millions of fans asking the same heartbreaking question for decades to come. Was Flex Wheeler denied immortality by fate itself, or was he simply born at the wrong time?
When Flex Wheeler began standing shoulder to shoulder with the greatest bodybuilders in the world, it became obvious that the sport was witnessing something extraordinarily rare because his physique represented a level of balance that many believed bodybuilding had been searching for since the days of the golden era, combining incredible muscle fullness with razor-sharp detail, flowing symmetry, and an elegance that remained visible from every angle. Which is why countless judges, champions, and bodybuilding experts openly admitted that if victory had been decided purely by aesthetics, Flex would almost certainly have collected multiple Mr. Olympia titles, since very few physiques in history had ever looked so complete while still appearing almost effortless. But destiny had prepared a different story, because during the most important years of Flex's career, he found himself competing in perhaps the most brutal era bodybuilding had ever experienced. First, against the dominance of Dorian Yates, whose unbelievable density, conditioning, and overwhelming size completely changed what judges expected from a champion. And later, against Ronnie Coleman, whose impossible combination of muscle mass, strength, conditioning, and stage presence pushed the limits of the human body beyond anything the sport had ever seen before, leaving Flex in the painful position of being good enough to defeat almost any champion from almost any other generation, while still sharing the stage with athletes who would eventually redefine bodybuilding forever. Yet blaming his lack of an Olympia title entirely on legendary rivals would ignore another battle that was taking place away from the bright lights of the stage, because as the years passed, Flex was forced to fight injuries, physical setbacks, and serious health problems that repeatedly interrupted his progress, forcing him to spend valuable time recovering instead of improving, and eventually leading to life-threatening kidney disease that placed his entire future in jeopardy, proving that sometimes the greatest opponent an athlete will ever face is not standing beside him during pre-judging, but silently growing inside his own body, where determination, talent, and discipline alone are no longer enough to guarantee victory. That is exactly why the debate surrounding Flex Wheeler has never disappeared. Because one group believes he was simply the greatest victim of bodybuilding's most competitive era. Another argues that injuries and illness stole the championships that should have been his, while others believe that fate itself refused to reward perhaps the most beautiful physique the sport had ever seen. And although nobody can rewrite history, one question continues to echo through gyms, documentaries, and conversations between bodybuilding fans around the world. If Flex Wheeler had competed in almost any other era, would we remember him today not only as one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time, but as a multiple-time Mr. Olympia champion? There is one detail that continues to make bodybuilding fans return to Flex Wheeler's career even decades later, because almost everyone who has carefully studied his physique, compared his photographs with other legends, or listened to the opinions of former champions eventually reaches the same question. How could a man whom so many people still describe as the most aesthetic bodybuilder in history leave the sport without ever winning a single Mr. Olympia title? Especially when it seemed that nature had given him nearly everything an athlete could possibly ask for. Yet professional bodybuilding has always reminded the world that perfect genetics alone can never guarantee greatness. When history places you in the same era as multiple all-time champions, your body begins fighting against you at the worst possible moments, and fate repeatedly tests your determination in ways that no training program could ever prepare you for. Despite every defeat, every injury and every devastating health setback, Flex Wheeler never disappeared from the hearts of bodybuilding fans, because there are champions who are remembered only for the trophies they collected, and then there are legends whose impact becomes greater than any title they never won. And Flex belongs to that second category, since even today, thousands of young athletes continue studying his posing routines, his proportions, his muscle shape, and his unmatched aesthetics in an attempt to understand how one man came so unbelievably close to physical perfection that his name is still spoken with admiration by people who were not even born during the greatest years of his career, proving that true greatness sometimes survives far longer than official records ever will. Perhaps that is the greatest irony of Flex Wheeler's entire story, because history officially remembers the men who lifted the Sandow Trophy, celebrated under the bright lights, and earned the title of Mr. Olympia. Yet millions of fans remember something different entirely, remembering the athlete who showed the world that greatness cannot always be measured by gold trophies, because a true legend is the one whose legacy continues inspiring future generations long after the competitions have ended, encouraging people to watch old footage again and again while asking themselves whether Flex Wheeler was actually the closest bodybuilding has ever come to creating the perfect physique, even if the judges never rewarded him with the sport's highest honor. That is why the story of Flex Wheeler is not the story of a man who failed, but the story of a man who became so extraordinary that the absence of a Mr. Olympia title only made his legend even greater. Because sometimes life takes away the crown in order to give someone something far more rare: immortality in the memories of millions of people who continue speaking not about how many trophies he won, but about how incredible he looked every single time he stepped onto the stage. And perhaps that is the reason why so many bodybuilding fans still call Flex Wheeler the greatest physique that never became Mr. Olympia.